Zeshan, thank you for that super chat. Piano Man, thank you for that super sticker. Maria, thank you for that super sticker. 456T123G says, thank you to the three of my most trusted intelligences, the Prophet. And Red Pill Scholar says, what to make of Ukraine cutting off the gas flow?
Yes, I think this is a fascinating thing. There's been no coherent explanation from Ukraine about what it's doing. And by the way, as we're making this program, I've been reading about how the Germans are now furiously complaining that Russia is weaponizing gas because they've imposed sanctions on certain companies in Germany, which were formerly Russian companies, which the German government has confiscated. But of course, they're saying nothing about what Ukraine is doing. I think what Ukraine is doing is it is using its position as a transit state in order to exert leverage. And again, just prior to making this program now with Alex, I'm hearing news, for example, that the European Union is now seriously considering dropping the oil sanctions that it was going to place on Russia because there's simply too much opposition. So I think Ukraine is signaling its displeasure, and I think that's partly what it's up to. But, who's to say the Ukrainians have not given a coherent explanation? What it shows, again, is that Ukraine's position as a transit state cannot be trusted, but it's a lesson the Europeans and the West refuse to learn.
Yelena, thank you for that super chat. Tim Gibson says, they may cut back money, but as you can say, neocons have no reverse gear.
True.
True. OMG Puppy says, State Department, it took 10 years, but we almost have NATO and Russia at war. Pentagon, wait, you did what?
Well, I think that's a very valid point. I mean, one does hope that as we get closer and closer to a crisis, the Pentagon will eventually do what it's not really what was succeeded in doing, which is put on the brakes. The problem with soldiers, relying on soldiers in this kind of situation, is that the nature of soldiers is that they obey orders. So if they get an order from the president, for them to simply say, no, Mr. President, we're not prepared to do that, that's not what they're trained for. That would be mutiny. That would violate their oath and their military military law. So that's why the Pentagon, that's why uniformed military people, to the extent that they're not neocons themselves and compromise themselves, which of course many are, but even the more rational amongst them, find it very, very difficult to stop a slide. Having said that, they do have a great deal of influence, and perhaps if things do move to a crisis, they will exert it.
Rich, thank you for that super sticker. Yelena, thank you for that super chat. Jennifer Chang says, speaking about Taiwan, our premier said that if China invades, he will not run away, but stand firmly to fight against the People's Liberation Army, PLA, until the last broomstick.
Well, I mean, let's hope it doesn't come to that. And there isn't a war over Taiwan. With every day that passes, I have to say, the prospect of war grows. And in my opinion, it's not coming from Taiwan. It's not coming from China. It's coming from the neocons in the United States, who are deliberately goading the Chinese dragon.
Tomo Tom 73 says, is de-dollarization part of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset narrative?
I would have thought not, actually. I would have thought that for the moment, keeping some kind of reserve currency, and that would be the dollar, would work to their interests. After all, what exactly is there to replace it with for the time being? Perhaps in time they have a longer term agenda to come up with something in its place. But for the moment, I think they would probably want to keep the dollar as the reserve currency. Bear in mind that when we talk about the dollar as a reserve currency, who controls the dollar? Who controls the way the dollar functions as a reserve currency? Not the American people, not the industrial class, the industrial, conglomerates in the United States, it's debatable to what extent they benefit from the dollar being a reserve currency. It's certain people in the financial community, it's the Federal Reserve Board, it's the politicians, the political elite, who are able to print dollars and therefore cover their massive spendings. And ultimately, of course, all of these people are connected to the globalist project and, in the end, to the WEF.
Svensteed says, in my late teens, early 20th, it was Alex Jones. And now 2 years to 40, it's Robert the Hushmaster Barnes, OFC. Shout out to the two Greeks.
Well, there you
Thank you
go.
very much for that.
Thank you.
Yelena Vidovich says, hard times create strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. This is by far the weakest leaders we have ever had in the collective West. Thank you very much for that.
I agree with both.
Wayne says,
I agree both with the cyclical point and with the last observation.
Wayne says Biden is currently live on USA Today here on YT. He has 37 viewing. Just saying. P.S. Great to be hearing Robert Barnes cutting up the BS and supporting everything AAA have been saying for so long. Thank you
37
very much, Wayne, for that.
Is it really 37? I mean, we're getting a lot more than that. Anyway, I may be misreading this. Carry on, Alex.
David S., thank you for that super sticker. Utnosen says the major wars start before September ends, so before midterms. Economic collapse is also acknowledged when summer ends. September is the scariest month.
It is indeed. August, September. It's always been the scariest months, the scariest times. By the way, on the subject of war, I remember reading a while back that the major armor defenses, this is before the actual fighting started, it was a Chinese discussion about war in Ukraine, that the months when the Russians were most likely to start their big armor defensives was in June. And that this is all a build up to that. And that was said even before the actual start of the war. So who knows? So major armor defensives in June, perhaps, followed by something really nasty and ugly at the end of August, beginning of September. I hope not. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Martin KK says, wars create winners and losers. The winner rules at the cost of much suffering. However, teamwork, partnership, and friendship create peace and a fruitful life for all involved. Love your broadcasts. Highlight to the day.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Summer of 1970, thank you for that super sticker. Oxville, thank you for that super sticker. War Wagon says, what are we going to do? Send in the My Two Mommies Armored Division? Thank you very much for that, War Wagon. Brian Halcott says, Robert's rules, one person talks at a time. Thank you very much for that, Brian. Baukejan says, UN Security Council President last month, UK this month, US next month, Albania followed by Brazil and China in August.
Yeah, interesting sequence. The West has an inbuilt majority on the Security Council. Never forget that, but it doesn't control it.
Yov says, Ukraine calls force majeure and halts 1/3 of European gas.
We've discussed this.
War Wagon says, newsflash, if we don't fight them over there, we won't have to fight them over here.
Yeah, I mean, it's always the story.
Thank you for that.
They always come up with.
Yeah, veteran support, thank you for that super chat. Paul Mansell, thank you for that super sticker. Yaroslav says, please, Duran, enable emojis on comments on your channel. If we have that feature, we'll add it. Yaroslav says, also, please enable emojis on comments on Telegram as well. I'll try. Cheers from Czech Republic. Thank you very much, Yaroslav, for that. I'll look into it. Lana A. Zankova says, Big Putin announced Big Putin announced has been that we mourn every loss, and the family of the fallen will be taken care of by the government and communities. Well,
indeed. I mean, but this is what war leaders always say, and it's part of war. Remember Lincoln's second inaugural address about how we will look after the widow and the orphan of those who fell in the battle, almost his last words, just after he says, with malice towards none, with charity for all. I'm not saying Putin has Lincoln's grasp of rhetoric, but it's the same sentiment.
RS says the Patriarch of Constantinople has just recognized the schismatics in Macedonia. Is this a power move like Ukraine, or is this genuine? How will
Well,
the Greeks receive it?
well, it's both. I mean, it's both a power move and it's genuine. The question is whether it will be accepted by the local believers in Macedonia. In Ukraine, it wasn't. I mean, the Ukrainian schismatic church never really got going. And whether it will this time in Macedonia, who knows? Montenegro, I suspect, will be next.
Bakuna Matata says, someone sulky liver sausage tonight. Thank you very much for that, Bakuna. Cactus Ray, thank you for that super sticker. Jamila, thank you for that super sticker. Mr. Tommy 0201, thank you for that super chat. Ralph says, draft POTUS decision is about restoring rights to the states as provided by the Constitution, not about abortion, contrary to the ubiquitous, ignorant, in my opinion, dialogue. Thanks for your work today,
You are
amigos.
you are absolutely dead right. Now, we're not going to say more about this on a program which appears on YouTube, because obviously we have to be careful what we say about this whole discussion. But you are absolutely entirely right.
Joy, thank you for that super chat. Ola Michelson, thank you from Norway. Tom Bear says the grift that keeps on grifting. Daniela, thank you for that super sticker. Nathan says Bush stole 2,000. Dems are bad, but the GOP is delusional and SCOTUS doesn't represent the US population. No one here supports unlimited campaign cash.
Well, I think that you're referring back to the decision that was made, and I can't remember the name of the case, some years back, which Antonin Scalia was very associated with, which basically allows corporations to fund to an unlimited extent political campaigns. Now, I'm not an expert on US constitutional law. I thought that was an unfortunate decision. I'm not sure how well founded it is constitutionally, and I'm not going to discuss it further. But campaign contributions from corporates have been a disaster in the United States. Of course, the great paradox is that the people who are benefiting from those disproportionately are not Republicans. They are Democrats. It's the Democrats who've been getting the big donations.
Sassy Pants says, is it possible that Ukraine is regrifting? Biden has been draining money out of that country for years.
Well, of course, it's exactly what he's doing. And, he's going to throw $40 billion, or at least he's going to try. I mean, there's Rand Paul has sort of put something of a spoke in the works about this, but, we'll see how far that goes. But, I mean, this is what's going to happen. Money goes in, money goes straight out. Most of it ends up in Washington or in London or in Brussels or wherever, and goes straight into accounts in the Turks and Caicos and all the the Cayman Islands and all these places, and none of it really goes, or very little of it actually goes back to Ukraine. And I'm sure that some of the people who are behind this package know that perfectly well.
Lucia, thank you for that super sticker. Mstral, thank you for that super chat. Vado says, is there a legal path to secession in the US?
No, I don't think there is. Now, I mean, that's my understanding of it. I mean, Lincoln essentially said it's unconstitutional. Secession is unconstitutional. There was a civil war, which was specifically on that issue, and the North, which ruled out secession, won. So unless you can somehow unravel all of that and reestablish the arguments that the people in the Confederacy had, which I think is debatable actually now, because we've got all 100 plus years, well, more 150 years of it going in the other direction. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to argue today that secession from the Union is constitutional.
Zukski says, parasites killing the host is how I see it. Am I wrong? Great stream. Thanks all.
No, you're absolutely right. You see it very well.
From Tony Neves, does Robert know if Lindsay will get taken out?
I'm sure he doesn't.
Lindsey Graham.
When I next speak to him, which is fairly often now, I'll ask him, but I'm sure he doesn't know.
Piano Man, thank you for that super sticker. Gerald Armstrong says Youngkin could have done something but chose not to.
Yeah, possibly.
Cryosynth42 says a jab, a pregnancy, your bodies are a game piece to them. They don't care about the product placed within, only their gains.
I fundamentally agree. I think this is really all about power, not about rights. And I think people need to understand that. And I think this is ultimately what this is all about. It is manipulation of feelings and attitudes in order to aggrandize power.
Sparky says millennial generation is the most obedient to authority generation in U.S. history. They may know the Bill of Rights but have no appreciation of it.
Well, because it's always, I mean, they have not been, perhaps, now, I haven't been to the United States for a while, so I can't really say, but I get the sense that, people are not as versed in this as they used to be in the United States, perhaps because the educational system isn't really geared to educating Americans about it. I still think that as people grow older, as they, imbue, if you like, the realities of American life, I think they will eventually become more concerned and conscious about these things.
Kathy, thank you for that super sticker. Carlota, thank you for that super chat. Wishbone says, Ukrainian stay and fight order in the East is from NATO's original strategy, which always was to entrench and stall the Russians as long as possible and win the war through economic sanctions.
I agree with that. I think you're absolutely spot on. I think what's happened is that Ukraine's taken a lot of advice from NATO. It's also, by the way, it's become very clear, received far more military aid from NATO over the 8 years preceding the war than was ever admitted to. And I think it's taken some of these doctrinal ideas from NATO, which you're absolutely correct in saying, whilst during the Cold War, required NATO to stand and fight in Germany, in East, along the Oder-Nice line, even if it was militarily impossible to do so because of the political imperatives. And I think that the Ukrainians are to some extent following this, but don't underestimate also the sheer amateurism of the Zelensky government. They don't want to give ground because amateurs find it very, very difficult to make decisions which might appear to lose face. So ordering retreats is not something they are really happy or find easy to do.